Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Heffe Chopshop. This week I'm going to tell you the story of the K24 Camry Vienta. So the old V6 was pretty tired, it was smoky and overheating, so this is when I decided it needed a new motor. But first, let's finish off this V6. So we travelled up to Oz Dyno in Madam, South Australia. We decided to have a hub dyno and barbecue night. After a quick lesson on how the dyno was made, we got straight into the testing. After the water methanol, ethanol, and a healthy dose of nitrous, we had a small intake backfire. So we decided to try again. And we made 166 kilowatts up from the 96 kilowatts when we first arrived. After this, it was time to send the engine onto its next life. The overheating wouldn't stop us, but this fire sure did. After thoroughly cleaning the entire car, I removed the engine and anything else we didn't need. After tearing the motor apart, we found large amounts of carnage, in the form of broken bolts, a few holes in the block, a smashed sump, and even 2 snapped rods. Now back to the car. I always like to start a project with a nice deep clean. So I jumped into the engine bay and pressure washed everything I could. Once everything was removed or cleaned, I jumped into thinning out the factory Camry wiring loom. After this was completed, I moved on to the power steering high pressure line. This required a 90-degree fitting to adapt the Honda power steering line to the Toyota rack fitting. With that out of the way, it was time to move on to the radiator to try and find a solution. A simple adapter bracket was made, and the Honda radiator fit perfectly. Even the factory Honda top brackets worked as per factory. The next step was to install the clutch master. I used a standard Toyota part for this, but some of the holes needed to be drilled in the firewall, as this was an automatic car originally. With the clutch master installed, it was onto the pedals. The clutch pedal is again stock Toyota, but the brake pedal needed trimming to fit with the new clutch. When planning this swap, I thought that the shifter would be a very fiddly part of the conversion. However, the Honda Accord cables fit directly onto the stock Camry shifter, and I couldn't believe it. Some brackets had to be made to hold the cables in the correct place, but other than that, it was almost a direct bolt-in. Then finally onto the engine. The K24 A3 was the best K24 variant that we received in Australia. I purchased a half-cut Honda Accord Euro CL9 for this swap, which had everything I needed. After removing the engine, gearbox and wiring from the half-cut, I labelled and removed the wiring loom. With the engine stripped down, it was time to offer it up. Some help from my mate Jackson made light work of this stage. Next up were the engine mounts. Some Nolithang control line bushes provided the flexible aspect, and some roll cage tube formed the start of the engine mount itself. A lot of drilling, cutting and welding later, we had the motor in the correct place and the engine mounts mocked up. A few carefully placed crush tubes in the chassis rail gave me something to bolt the engine mounts to. On to finishing the power steering system. Unbelievably, the factory Accord reservoir bolted to the Camry rail and the standard hose was the correct shape and length. With the engine mounted, I could finally test the new shifter and plumb up the radiator. Then I had to call in the big guns. This is my mate Richo. He's a wiring and mechanical wizard. He stripped and labelled the wiring loom. This was the start of getting his head around all of the wires. Whilst he did that, I plumbed up the heater. Then I made a very temporary exhaust adapter to connect the K24 to the factory Camry exhaust and catalytic converter. After that, I made a custom intake from the K24 to the Camry airbox. The fuel system was next and was made much easier with an aftermarket fuel pressure regulator and a lot of fuel hose. I don't like the placement of this, but it will get moved in the next rendition. Moving on to the drive shafts. These are also temporary, but with them turned down and sleeved, I threw the welder at them for a good enough result for now. It wouldn't be a nice build without ensuring the AC worked. I had the Honda lines welded to the Camry lines, making this a straightforward install, and everything lined up wonderfully. Now back to the wiring. I sure am glad Richo knew what he was doing, as I was lost weeks earlier. However, with some confidence, I redid the engine bay power wiring and moved the battery to the boot. Meanwhile, Richo battled on with the wiring, and it was time for a first start. After checking over my work, it was time for a test drive.
Right.
On the first full forced first to second gear change, we snapped an axle.
Ah, we broke something already.
I accepted defeat for the night and went back the following day to fix the axle. After the repair, we were finally able to give it a proper rev.
50. It's not super fast, but it's definitely faster than it should be. For a Camry anyway. Pretty fun. What do you reckon, Jackson?
I get it. I love it. It has more power than it has any right to be.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It doesn't drill a big old hole in the airbox though.
Isn't it like comparable kilowatts to the V6s, isn't it?
So it's like 5 or 10 kilowatts more, but less torque.
It feels the opposite.
It feels way better. So I think that V6 was definitely hurt before we put it on the dyno.
I think it was very, very hurt.
Now it's been 2 months since we first drove this car. You might be wondering how it's going. So before I get into that, there are a few other modifications to this car that I'd like to tell you about. So the wheels are off a Suzuki Grand Vitara. These were super cheap off of Marketplace on Facebook, and they fit by just a tiny amount, and they are 17s. The tyres are a Dynamo Street H, which is apparently a Mickey Thompson off-brand, and when I googled quietest tyres, these are what were suggested. These are a 215 50/17, and they do grip pretty well, and they are quite quiet. Moving to the back, we've got a louver on the exterior of the rear window, and on the inside of the window we have a Venetian blind. Since purchasing the car, I have added a tow bar and trailer wiring plug. This car actually tows very well. Obviously you can't tow very much, but it does tow very well. The interior of the car has Dynamat the whole way through. It does need it on the doors and the roof lining, but the floor is all done when I had the interior out. I've ordered a Toyota Supra 6-speed leather gear knob, and then a steering wheel off of a Toyota Altezza, which is a Lexus IS200, IS300, but it is off of a manual, so it does not have the buttons on the front for up and down shift, and it also is fully black rather than black and silver. Now, there's a few things on this car that don't work. So the speedo does not work, the tacho does not work currently, the air conditioner does not work, and the cruise control does not work. So cruise control we deleted, both the Honda and the Camry side of things, because we either needed the Toyota ECU to continue using the Toyota cruise control, or we needed to use the Honda ABS and yaw sensors to get the Honda cruise control working. Now the speedo and tacho are coming soon. They are not working because we haven't actually tried to hook anything up yet. Richo, my friend that's very good at wiring, he's looking into it, and he's got a module on the way, and we should have that done in the next couple of weeks. As for the air conditioner, I said that no car is complete without air conditioning, and the reason that doesn't work is because the climate control system, because this is a Vienta, has the very fancy climate control, and that does not work without a tacho signal. So without the tacho working, the air conditioner doesn't work, which is pretty weird, but that is apparently reasonably common with Toyotas. So they are the 4 things that do not work. Other than that, everything works wonderfully. And overall, other than the axles, I've had no issues. I took the exhaust out, the joiner that I made, and beat that with a hammer and put it back in because it was rubbing on the subframe. And since then, it's been smooth sailing. Now, because we don't have a speedo, I can't tell you how many kilometers I've done or what the fuel mileage is, but overall, it's a huge improvement over the V6, and it's a lot more enjoyable experience to drive. And it also just feels a whole lot nicer, and I trust this motor a whole lot more than I did the V6. Now, as for future improvements on this car, I want to get all of the gauges working with the factory Honda ECU, the air conditioning, all that sort of stuff. We probably won't worry about cruise control for now. Then I'd like to, in about a year, put a aftermarket ECU, probably a Link, and then put a turbo on this thing and try and make around the 240 kilowatt mark, because that will be super fun and quite reliable still, whilst also keeping the gearbox in one piece. Apparently these things turn to glass after about 250 kilowatts. Other than that, I'd like to engineer it once all of that stuff is complete. This car is 100%, and then I'll just drive it and enjoy it. As for the engine bay, it's turned out reasonably neat and tidy. I'd like to revisit this fuel situation in the corner and also move the cable to electric adapter, which was factory Honda, because there's no reason I can't put a TPS on the accelerator pedal and get rid of this box and this big cable, which will make everything look a whole lot neater. This factory intake will go once there is a turbo in place, and also a lot of that fuel line down there will be removed or moved to make room for a turbo. I think it's pretty clean and reasonably tidy. There is a bunch of stuff that isn't 100%, but overall, super stoked with the outcome. To keep with the theme of keeping this thing quiet, it has 3 different sets of carpet. So there's one there, one there, one there, and then all of the sound deadening as well. The shifter, I have heated it up and bent it so it is in a nice place, and the shift is super short and really notchy. It's a very nice place to be now. Just need some tint, I think. Bit of tint and fix this headlining because I'm sick of this. So some people think I've ruined this, some people think I have greatly improved it. I guess you guys can tell me down in the comments which one you think it is. If you would like to see the full build, please check out the playlist on my channel El Jeffe's Chopshop. There are 6 videos. There's one of the dyno night, there's one of us inspecting the engine that we pulled out, and 4 of the build itself. Now there will be more to this build later, but for now, that's all. Thank you for watching.